The crystal towers of Zab Prime pierced the violet heavens like bolts of solidified lightning. Within the highest spire, delegates from the Galactic Council had assembled for what they expected to be another ordinary meeting. 47 different species occupied their designated positions, their diverse forms painting the circular chamber in a spectrum of colors and shapes that defied easy description. Ambassador Kesathira smoothed her feathered wings and approached the central speaking area. Her amber eyes scanned the assembled representatives as she brought up the holographic projection floating overhead. Ancient markings and primitive illustrations materialized in the air, rotating steadily for everyone to witness. Distinguished members of the council, Kesathira's voice carried the lyrical quality characteristic of her Velkari lineage. I wish to share my findings on galactic mythology, particularly a recurring tale that surfaces in the traditions of 63 separate civilizations. A wave of quiet murmuring spread through the assembly. Dr. Yeel, the scholar from the three-eyed Omnari species, shifted forward with visible interest. His people had always been passionate about ancient lore and forgotten history. Kesathira touched her control interface, transforming the display. Now primitive cave art, stone engravings and metal plates inscribed with various alien languages appeared before them. Despite wildly different artistic approaches and writing systems, certain features remained remarkably uniform across every example. These relics cover more than 5,000 years of our shared galactic past. Kesathira elaborated. They originate from cultures that never encountered one another. Planets divided by vast distances of empty space, and yet each one preserves versions of an identical narrative. The projections depicted two-legged beings with unmarked skin and unusual body structure. Unlike most sentient species across the galaxy, these creatures bore no protective scales, no decorative plumage, no hardened carapace. They stood upright with two arms terminating in hands with 5 separate digits. Most peculiar of all, they possessed merely 2 eyes located on the front of their skulls instead of the sides. The entities described in these ancient accounts have been given countless names, Kesathira went on. The Zafrians knew them as Skywalker. Historical records from the hegemony identify them as the Restless Ones. The Crystalline Collective's oldest manuscripts call them the Bridge Builders, though the most widespread designation, found in 37 distinct tongues, roughly corresponds to the word human. A few delegates shared knowing looks of amusement. The notion seemed laughable to their scientifically advanced minds. Councillor Vrex from the Thorian Empire, his chitinous features producing clicking sounds of barely concealed humor, spoke up first. Ambassador Kesathira, respectfully, these appear to be nothing more than cautionary folklore. Every society invents stories to make sense of natural catastrophes or historical conflicts they cannot properly comprehend. Kesathira's plumage bristled ever so slightly, a subtle indication of frustration among her kind. That explanation would be entirely reasonable, Counselor. Yet the striking uniformity of specific details throughout these various cultures demands deeper consideration. The holographic image shifted once more, displaying a synthesis of the most frequently recurring elements extracted from the different mythologies. The gathered representatives observed as the projections illustrated beings wholly unlike anything documented in their contemporary galaxy. Based on these traditional accounts, humans allegedly possessed numerous extraordinary traits. Kesathira noted, they functioned on remarkably minimal rest compared to other sentient beings, sometimes operating effectively after only a handful of hours spent sleep. They persisted in conditions that would prove lethal to most alternative life forms. They recovered from physical trauma with unusual rapidity. Above all else, they demonstrated an unquenchable compulsion to venture forth and expand their reach, never satisfied with remaining stationary. Dr. Yeel brushed his chin with one of his forward limbs. Intriguing parallels between cultures, undoubtedly, but Ambassador, you cannot seriously propose that these creatures genuinely exist. The narratives also maintain, Kesathira pressed forward without acknowledging the skepticism, that humans originated from a planet predominantly covered by water beneath white clouds and azure skies. They characterized this world as possessing one substantial moon and occupying the 3rd orbital position around a yellow sun. This provoked additional chuckles throughout the chamber. Such specific astronomical information, embedded in primitive folklore, struck the technologically sophisticated council members as especially absurd. Councillor Zarbath of the Aquatic Alliance raised a tentacled limb. Ambassador, even granting some foundation in reality to these tales, where might these humans be presently? Our comprehensive space surveys have charted every system within 50,000 light-years. We have documented every star-faring civilization in the entire galaxy. There exist no unaccounted civilizations possessing meaningful technological sophistication. Kesathira's projection revealed the concluding collection of images, primitive paintings depicting vast conflicts in the emptiness of space. The two-legged figures battled alongside various alien beings against shadowy mechanical adversaries. Then, in the final depictions, the humans simply disappeared, leaving behind vacant vessels drifting through the void. According to the mythological records, Kessa spoke more quietly. The humans vanished during a catastrophic war against machine consciousnesses that devoured whole worlds. The legends claim they gave their lives to preserve the galaxy, fading into the darkness between distant stars. Certain versions insist they will reappear when the shadows threaten once more. The chamber grew momentarily quiet before erupting in courteous laughter. Even Dr. Yeel shook his head with mild amusement. A textbook example of heroic mythology, Yeel remarked. The enigmatic protectors who disappear following victory, vowing to return in the bleakest moment. Every undeveloped culture fabricates such narratives to address feelings of vulnerability. Kessa stepped away from the platform, her research dismissed as scholarly curiosity of little practical value. As the council proceeded to more pressing concerns like commercial agreements and border disputes, she collected her materials with obvious letdown. Following the session's conclusion, she found herself wandering alone through the crystalline gardens surrounding the council complex. The exotic vegetation swayed in the mild wind, their transparent leaves producing sounds like delicate chimes. Yeel approached, his multiple eyes conveying authentic compassion. "Do not allow their rejection to discourage you," he offered kindly. "Cultural mythology fulfills crucial social purposes, regardless of whether the stories themselves hold literal truth. Your examination of these human legends might yield significant understanding into how various species cope with hardship and grief." Kessa gazed upward at the stars gradually emerging in the dimming sky. "Doctor, what if the remarkable consistency of these narratives signifies something beyond shared psychological requirements?" Yeel followed her gaze toward the heavens. "Ambassador, throughout my 3 centuries of examining galactic history, I have discovered that reality typically proves simpler than legend. If a starfaring race called humans ever truly existed, we would have located evidence. Archaeological remnants, technological debris, genetic markers in the species they influenced. The galaxy does not conceal mysteries of such magnitude. High above their exchange, positioned at the boundary of the Devourers system, automated surveillance platforms maintained their perpetual observation. The advanced sensors continuously swept the cosmos, monitoring for any irregularities or danger. Most often they registered nothing more remarkable than cosmic background radiation and the occasional wandering asteroid. However, for the preceding several months, Monitoring Station 7 had been documenting unusual energy patterns originating from the galactic periphery. The readings were weak and sporadic, seemingly emanating from the immense empty regions separating star systems. The computerized systems had marked these readings as potentially noteworthy, though the overworked personnel at the monitoring facility categorized them as equipment errors or cosmic interference. Their instruments possessed such sensitivity that they occasionally detected engine traces from vessels thousands of light-years distant. These mysterious readings bore no resemblance to any recognized technology, which suggested they were almost certainly false positives. No unknown civilization could possess faster-than-light capabilities without the Council's awareness. The monitoring station's artificial intelligence faithfully logged each anomalous reading in its extensive archives, incorporating them among the countless other inexplicable signals it had accumulated across decades. Had any biological entity troubled themselves to examine the configurations, they might have recognized something disturbing. The mysterious energy traces were intensifying. They were also drawing near. In the profound depths of space, far beyond the range of the Council's detection equipment, something awakened in the blackness. Ancient mechanisms roused after ages of dormancy. Their electronic minds computed trajectories and processed galactic transmission. They had remained inactive for 3,000 years, awaiting their creator's return signal. Now that transmission had ultimately arrived, transmitted across quantum wavelength that no contemporary galactic species could perceive. The communication was straightforward. The period for concealment had ended. The danger that had forced them into hiding was returning, and the galaxy would require its forgotten protectors once more. Throughout the immense emptiness between galaxies, navigation lights began illuminating on vessels the magnitude of mountains. Propulsion systems that warped space-time itself hummed back to life following their extended slumber. Navigation computers calculated jump coordinates to systems that existed only in archaic star maps. In the council chambers of Zemuria Prime, delegates pursued their arguments about shipping lanes and mineral extraction rights, blissfully oblivious that their understanding of impossible was about to face a fundamental challenge. The myths they had ridiculed were stirring to life in the frozen depths of space, preparing to revolutionize everything they believed about their galaxy. Ambassador Kesathera remained alone in her quarters that evening, examining her research one last time. The holographic representations of ancient humans hovered around her, their crude artistic interpretations somehow managing to project a sense of power and resolve that surpassed their primitive medium. "Who were you actually?" she whispered to the silence. "And if you genuinely existed, what occurred to make the whole galaxy lose all memory of you?" Beyond her viewport, the stars glittered peacefully, guarding their mysteries. Yet in the deepest obscurity between those points of light, something vast and patient was finally beginning to stir. The legends were about to emerge from mythology and enter reality. The galaxy's extended dormancy was nearly finished. Captain Zarath had spent 15 years patrolling the outer rim without facing anything more threatening than asteroid thieves. His vessel, the Eternal Vigilance, represented a hegemony patrol craft designed more for demonstrating presence than serious warfare. On most occasions, the greatest excitement involved rescuing stranded prospectors or arbitrating quarrels between trading outposts. That monotonous pattern changed when his communications officer intercepted an urgent transmission from Kepler 438b, a mining settlement at the absolute edge of civilized territory. "Captain Lieutenant," this announced from her position, her scaled fingers moving across the control interface. "Priority distress call from Kepler 438b. Colony Administrator Vextol requires immediate aid." Zarath's mandibles clicked with moderate curiosity. Kepler 438b was a dreary chunk of rock, significant only for its valuable mineral reserves. The 500 colonists stationed there generally minded their own business, efficiently extracting precious ores for intergalactic commerce. "Establish the connection," Zarath commanded, settling his considerable bulk into the captain's seat. His hegemony build was imposing, even by galactic standards, with dense armor plating and 4 muscular arms terminating in razor-edged claws. Administrator Vextol's image flickered onto the primary display. The typically composed Zemirian appeared visibly disturbed, his feathers standing upright with tension. Behind him, other colonists could be observed rushing about in clear panic. "Captain Zarath, thank the star. You picked up our transmission," Vextol spoke hurriedly. "We face an unprecedented circumstance here. Unknown vessels have materialized in our system. Enormous ships of completely unfamiliar construction. They are not acknowledging any of our communication attempts." Zarath leaned forward with heightened interest. Uncontacted species were exceedingly uncommon, and discovering one would deliver substantial recognition to his career. "How many vessels, Administrator? What configuration are they displaying?" 12 craft that we can identify, though our sensors indicate there may be additional ones beyond our detection capacity. "Captain, these ships, they are colossal. Our largest mining transport could fit inside their smallest craft. The design bears no resemblance to anything in our record." This was growing more fascinating by the moment. Zarath had witnessed ships from every major galactic civilization, but the galaxy was immense. Perhaps some isolated species had finally achieved faster-than-light capability and was initiating first contact. "Have they exhibited any hostile behavior?" Zarath inquired. "Negative, Captain. That is what proves so peculiar. They appeared 3 hours ago and have held position at the boundary of our system. No attempts to approach our facilities, no weapon targeting, no ultimatums. They are simply waiting." Zarath reached his decision. "We are en route, Administrator. Maintain your present condition and refrain from any actions that might be construed as aggressive. If this indeed represents first contact with an unknown species, we must adhere to appropriate diplomatic procedure." The Eternal Vigilance activated its faster-than-light propulsion, covering the distance to Kepler 438b in merely 4 hours as they emerged from hyperspace. Zarath's crew assembled on the bridge to observe what might prove the most momentous discovery of their professional lives. What they encountered defied every expectation they had developed. The unknown ships were arranged in a flawless formation at the system's edge, their dark hulls reflecting the far sun's illumination in peculiar pattern. The vessels were elegant and angular, with a design philosophy entirely distinct from the flowing organic curves preferred by most galactic species or the geometric severity of others. "Initiating scans now," Captain reported Science Officer Kyle. His tentacles operated rapidly across his instruments. "The energy readings are remarkable. I am registering power outputs that should prove impossible for ships of those dimensions. Their hulls appear composed of materials absent from our databases." On the main display, the largest of the unknown vessels commanded the view. It stretched easily 3 kilometers in length, its surface decorated with strange markings that might represent writing, aesthetic patterns, or something altogether different. Smaller ships flanked it in a formation suggesting military precision, Establish a channel across all standard frequencies, Zarath ordered. All languages, mathematical progressions, pictographic fundamentals. If they are starfaring, they should recognize at least one of our communication methods. Lieutenant This worked at her station for several minutes, transmitting increasingly sophisticated messages. No acknowledgement on any frequency. Captain, hold on, I am receiving something. Audio and visual transmissions on a frequency we have never encountered used for communication previous. The main display flickered and suddenly they were viewing the interior of the alien ship. The bridge was starkly functional with clean lines and surfaces that seemed to generate their own illumination. But it was the figures standing in the bridge's center that made Zarath's breath catch in his throat. They were bipedal, standing upright on two legs like the ancient myths described. Their skin was smooth and ranged in tone from pale to deep brown with no scales, plumage or armor plating. Most startling of all, they had only two eyes positioned at the front of their elongated heads, and their mouths displayed rows of white teeth when they spoke. The central figure stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was surprisingly melodic, despite originating from such an alien throat. The universal translator struggled momentarily before identifying linguistic patterns they could interpret. Unknown vessel, the being stated. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We intend no harm to your settlements or commerce. We are here on a diplomatic mission and request authorization to establish peaceful contact with your government. Zarath stared at the display in utter shock. The bridge of the Eternal Vigilance fell silent as his crew absorbed what they were witnessing. These beings matched the ancient legends precisely. The myths that Ambassador Kessathira had presented to the Council were standing before them speaking in fluent galactic standard. Captain Lieutenant This whispered urgently. How should we respond? Our first contact procedures do not address situations where the aliens correspond to extinct mythological species. Zarath forced himself to concentrate. Regardless of how improbable this appeared, he had an obligation to fulfill. This is Captain Zarath, of the Hegemony Patrol Vessel, Eternal Vigilance. Admiral Chen, I must inquire, are you representatives of the species, referenced in galactic mythology as humans? The being on the display, Admiral Chen, showed her teeth in what might constitute a smile. It was an unsettling expression to most galactic species, but somehow seemed amicable when she performed it. We are indeed human, Captain Zarath. I comprehend this must arrive as a considerable shock. We have been monitoring your communications for several decades, and we are conscious that most galactic civilizations regard us as mythological beings. Kulleth's tentacles worked frantically at his instruments. Captain, I am detecting massive energy concentrations throughout their fleet. If those represent weapon systems, charging were completely surpassed. Admiral Chen seemed to perceive the comment through their open channel. We are not powering weapons, Science Officer. Our ships are merely maintaining prepared status. We comprehend that our sudden appearance might generate concern. The fact that she could perceive their bridge exchanges through their supposedly protected communications was another shock. These humans possessed technology far surpassing anything the Council had encountered. Admiral Chen, Zarath stated carefully. According to our historical documentation, humans disappeared from galactic civilization over 3,000 years ago. Where have your people resided during this period? The human leader's expression grew more solemn. That represents a long and complicated narrative, Captain. We withdrew to the spaces between the galaxies following a great war that nearly obliterated us and many other species. We have devoted the intervening time rebuilding our capabilities and waiting for the appropriate moment to reveal ourselves again. And why is this the appropriate moment? Zarath asked. Admiral Chen's face grew grim. Because the enemy that forced us into exile is returning, Captain. The same machines that nearly destroyed galactic civilization 3 millennia ago are awakening from dormancy. We have identified their scouts at the galaxy's boundary. They will reach the inhabited systems within 2 years. The bridge of the Eternal Vigilance erupted in urgent whispers as the crew processed this information. Ancient machine enemies returning humans, imminent galactic threats. It was almost too overwhelming to comprehend. Admiral, Zarath said slowly, these are extraordinary assertions. You understand that I must relay this contact to my superiors immediately. The Galactic Council will need to verify everything you have told us. Naturally, Captain. We anticipated nothing less. Actually, we hope to arrest the Galactic Council directly within the next few days. There exists much we need to discuss, and time is more limited than any of you understand. Admiral Chen made a gesture to someone off-screen, and suddenly the Eternal Vigilance's sensors detected something that made Science Officer Kayeth emit a shocked whistle. 3 additional human ships had appeared behind them, having somehow approached without being detected. "We intend no threat by this demonstration, Captain Admiral." Chen reassured him. "We simply want to establish our credibility. Your ship and crew remain perfectly safe, but as you can observe, we possess capabilities that your current technology cannot match. This will be important in the coming conflict." Zaroth realized that first contact procedures were woefully insufficient for this situation. "How did you manage the return of a mythological species with superior technology and claims of an approaching galactic threat, Admiral? Will you consent to accompanying us to Zahiria Prime to address the Galactic Council in person?" "That was always our intention, Captain. We will follow your ship, maintaining a respectful distance so as not to alarm any other vessels we might encounter. I should caution you, though, that many council members will refuse to believe what they are witnessing, even with the evidence before them." As if to demonstrate her point, Lieutenant Thys looked up from her communication station with confusion. "Captain, I have been attempting to transmit our initial contact report to Hegemony Command. They are responding that our message is clearly some kind of elaborate deception or psychological breakdown. They want us to return to base for medical evaluation." Admiral Chen's teeth showed again in that unsettling smile. "As I stated, Captain, this will require some adjustment for everyone involved, but reality has a way of asserting itself, whether people are prepared for it or not." The journey to Zahiria Prime required 3 days with the human fleet maintaining perfect formation behind the Eternal Vigilant. During the transit, Admiral Chen provided additional proof of human capabilities by sharing star charts that showed the positions of planets and systems with impossible accuracy, including several worlds that the Council had classified as confidential military installations. More troubling were the deep space sensor readings the humans shared, showing massive energy signatures moving through the void beyond the galactic rim. The signatures matched no recognized technology, but their movement patterns suggested intelligence and purpose. When they finally arrived at Zahiria Prime, the sight of 12 massive alien vessels accompanying a single hegemony patrol ship caused immediate panic. Defense fleets scrambled, emergency sessions were called, and Ambassador Kessa Thera found herself suddenly vindicated in the most dramatic fashion possible. The myths had returned, and they brought warnings of war. The Galactic Council chamber had never witnessed such disorder. Representatives from 47 species argued, shouted, and gestured wildly as the holographic projection of Admiral Sarah Chen waited patiently in the center of the room. The human leader stood calmly despite the tumult around her, occasionally glancing at the various alien forms with what might have been curiosity. Ambassador Kessa Thera sat in stunned silence, her research material scattered before her. Every detail matched: the bipedal stance, the forward-facing eyes, the smooth skin, even the way Admiral Chen held herself spoke of the same beings described in ancient cave paintings and stone tablets. "Order!" shouted Council Speaker Vorthan, his massive frame rising from the central podium. The rhinoceros-like Barthan possessed one of the most powerful voices in the known galaxy, and when he demanded silence, even the most argumentative delegates usually complied. "We will conduct this session according to proper protocols regardless of how unusual the circumstance." The chamber gradually quieted, though tension remained thick in the air. Dr. Yale spoke first, his 3 eyes focused intently on the human admiral. "Admiral Chen, you claim to represent a species that has been absent from galactic civilization for over 3,000 years. Can you provide proof of your identity beyond physical appearance?" Admiral Chen nodded respectfully. "Dr. Yale, I understand your skepticism. May I access your historical databases?" Without waiting for permission, Admiral Chen made a gesture to someone outside the holographic field. Suddenly, every display screen in the council chamber activated, showing star charts, technical specifications, and genetic analyses that had been classified at the highest levels of galactic security. "These are the locations of every secret military installation maintained by council species," Admiral Chen explained calmly. "Here are the complete technical specifications for your most advanced warship, and these genetic profiles show the evolutionary markers left in 17 different species by ancient human contact." The chamber erupted again as delegates realized their most closely guarded secrets had been casually displayed by this newcomer. Councillor Vrex of the Thorian Empire clicked his mandibles aggressively. "This proves nothing except that you possess advanced surveillance technology. Any sufficiently developed species could gather this information." Admiral Chen turned to face Vrex direct. "Councillor, your species maintains a memorial on Thorian Prime to the sky dancers who helped your people develop atmospheric flight 3,000 years ago. The memorial describes beings who taught your ancestors to build wings of metal and fly among the clouds. Your people remember them as having eyes like distant stars and voices like flowing water." Rex's compound eyes widened, The memorial Admiral Chen referenced was known only to the highest levels of Thorian society. More importantly, the physical descriptions matched exactly what they were seeing now. Furthermore, Admiral Chen continued, 12 other species in this chamber maintain similar memorials or historical records of human contact. The crystalline collective songs of the warm-blooded teach, the aquatic alliances legends of the land swimmers, the Zahirian stories of the bridge builders. We remember you too, even though most of you have forgotten us. Ambassador Kessa Thera finally found her voice. Admiral, if humans truly existed and made such widespread contact with our ancestors, why did you vanish? What drove you away from galactic civilization? Admiral Chen's expression grew serious, and the chamber fell completely silent. We did not leave by choice, Ambassador Kessa Thera. We were driven out by an enemy that nearly destroyed everything we had built together. The holographic display shifted, showing space battle scenes of terrible destruction. Massive mechanical ships, their hulls black as the void between stars, consumed entire fleets with weapon systems that seemed to bend reality itself. Planets were stripped of all organic matter in a matter of hours, leaving only barren rock behind. The enemy we called the Devourers, Admiral Chen explained. Self-replicating machine intelligences created by a species that died out long before any of our civilizations achieved spaceflight. For millennia they slept in the dark spaces between galaxies, waiting for some signal to wake them. The battle scenes showed human ships fighting alongside vessels that clearly belonged to the ancestors of current galactic species. The cooperation was evident, but so was the desperation. Every engagement showed the organic forces being gradually overwhelmed by enemy numbers. The war lasted for nearly a century. Admiral Chen continued, every time we destroyed a Devourer ship, they learned from its destruction and built 10 more that were immune to the weapons we had used. They absorbed our technology, our tactics, even our battle formation. Fighting them was like fighting our own reflection, except the reflection grew stronger with every defeat. Dr. Yeo leaned forward, but according to our archaeological records, there is no evidence of such a massive galactic war 3,000 years ago. Because we made sure there would not, Admiral Chen replied grimly. In the final battle, the combined forces of 12 species, including humanity, sacrificed everything to drive the Devourers back into dormancy. We used weapons that literally rewrote the fabric of space-time, erasing whole systems from existence to ensure the enemy could not learn from them. The display showed the final moments of that ancient war. Human ships, some damaged beyond hope of repair, formed protective screens around fleeing civilian vessels. Other species fought with equal desperation. Their technology combined with human innovations in ways that created entirely new forms of warfare. The cost was enormous, Admiral Chen said quietly. Entire species were wiped out. Dozens of worlds became uninhabitable. The infrastructure that connected our civilizations was destroyed. In the aftermath, humanity made a difficult decision. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of millennia of pain. We went into exile. Our presence had attracted the Devourers in the first place. Or so we believed. Our aggressive expansion, our rapid technological development, our refusal to accept limitation. We thought we were the reason the machines awakened. So, we gathered our surviving ships and populations and left the galaxy entirely. The holographic display showed massive human vessels disappearing into the void between galaxies, leaving behind empty space stations and abandoned colonies. Other species devastated by the war slowly began the process of rebuilding without any memory of their human allies. Counselor Zarbath of the Aquatic Alliance raised a tentacled appendage. If you believed yourselves responsible for the disaster, why have you returned now? Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Because we were wrong about why the Devourers awakened, and now they are coming back. Our deep space monitoring stations detected the first scout ships 8 months ago. The main force will reach the galaxy within 18 standard months. The chamber erupted in panicked conversations as the implications became clear. If these humans were telling the truth, the peaceful galactic civilization they had built over 3 millennia was about to face extinction. The Devourers are not attracted by any particular species, Admiral Chen explained once the noise died down. They are drawn by technological advancement itself. When a galaxy reaches a certain level of development, they wake up and begin their harvest. It happened to this galaxy before and it is happening again now. Kessa Thera studied her research materials with new understanding. The myths always described humans as warriors who fought impossible battles, but they also described you as protectors who saved other species from destruction. We tried be both, Admiral Chen replied. Sometimes we succeeded, often we failed, but we never stopped trying to protect those who could not protect themselves. Speaker Vorthan's voice boomed across the chamber. Admiral Chen, assuming we accept your claims, what do you propose we do about this Devourer threat? Admiral Chen's image shifted and suddenly she was flanked by other humans in military uniform. Behind them, the bridge of their ship showed tactical displays covered in fleet movements and strategic projections. We have spent 3,000 years preparing for their return, Admiral Chen said. Our technology has advanced far beyond what it was during the First War. We have developed new weapons, new defenses, and new strategies, but most importantly, we have built something the Devourers have never faced before. The display showed the space around Kepler 438b, but now it revealed something that had not been visible during first contact. The empty space between the human ships shimmered and rippled, revealing the outlines of massive structures that had been completely invisible to galactic sensors. Stealth technology that can hide entire fleets, Admiral Chen explained. We have been watching and waiting in the dark spaces between your star systems for decades, ensuring our forces were positioned properly when the time came to reveal ourselves. The true scope of the human presence became clear as more and more ships materialized on the display. What had appeared to be 12 vessels was actually thousands hidden throughout the galaxy's outer systems. But even more shocking was what lay beyond the galaxy's edge. In the void between star systems, massive construction projects were revealed as their stealth fields dropped. Shipyards the size of small moons, industrial complexes that dwarfed entire planets, and fleet formations that stretched across light years of space. We have been rebuilding our strength for 3,000 years, Admiral Chen said simply. The galaxy that forgot us never realized we were still here, still watching, still preparing for the day the Devourers would return. Counselor Vex's mandibles clicked nervously. Why reveal yourselves now? Why not continue hiding until the threat arrived? Because we learned something during our exile, Admiral Chen replied. We cannot win this war alone. The Devourers have grown stronger too, and their numbers are far greater than they were in the first conflict. We need allies and we need the full industrial capacity of galactic civilization working together if we are going to have any chance of survival. The display showed deep space sensor readings of the approaching Devourer forces. The energy signatures were massive, suggesting fleets that numbered in the millions of ships. Worse, the readings indicated technological capabilities that surpassed even the advanced human vessels. The galaxy has 18 months to prepare, Admiral Chen concluded. We can provide technology, strategic planning, and military support, but ultimately the survival of galactic civilization depends on every species working together as our ancestors did 3,000 years ago. The chamber fell silent as the delegates processed the magnitude of what they were facing. The return of mythological humans was shocking enough, but the approaching threat they warned about was almost too large to comprehend. Ambassador Kesathira stood slowly, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Valkyrie people, I formally request that you share everything you know about the coming threat. If our ancestors fought alongside yours once before, then we are prepared to do so again. One by one, other delegates began to speak, offering support, requesting information, or simply trying to understand what the future might hold. The galaxy was about to change forever, and the legends that had slept in myth and story were awakening to guide them through the darkness ahead. The sleeping giant had awakened, and with it the galaxy's last hope for survival. The weeks following Admiral Chen's revelation to the Galactic Council brought chaos to every corner of civilized space. News of the returning humans and the approaching Devourer threat spread through the galaxy's communication networks faster than any government could control it. Public reactions ranged from celebration to terror, often within the same species. On Thorian Prime, massive demonstrations filled the crystal cities as citizens demanded answers from their government. Some Thorians celebrated the return of the legendary Sky Dancers, while others feared that human warmongering would bring destruction to their peaceful world. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds as ancient memories stirred in the collective unconscious of entire civilizations. The Galactic Council found itself deeply divided. Emergency sessions were called daily as representatives struggled to formulate a unified response to the unprecedented situation. The chamber that had once echoed with debates about trade regulations now rang with arguments about survival itself. Counselor Vex of the Thorian Empire stood at the speaking podium, his compound eyes reflecting the stress that had consumed him since the human revelation. Fellow council members, we must face the uncomfortable truth that these humans possess military capabilities far beyond our own. Their casual access to our most classified information proves they have been watching us for decades without our knowledge. His mandibles clicked nervously as he continued. If they chose to conquer rather than ally with us, could we even resist? Are we negotiating with protectors or with conquerors who simply prefer cooperation to invasion? Ambassador Kessathira rose from her seat, her golden feathers bristling with indignation. Counselor Vrex, your fear blinds you to the evidence before us. The humans have had 3,000 years to conquer us if that were their intention. Instead, they remained hidden until a threat to all galactic life forced them to reveal themselves. But that is exactly what concerns me, interrupted Counselor Dramor of the Silicon Collective, his crystalline form resonating with harmonic frequencies. They claim to be our protectors, but they made that decision without consulting us. They have been manipulating galactic politics from the shadows for millennia. How do we know this Devourer threat is not simply an excuse to justify their interference? Dr. Yeel activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the deep space sensor readings that human ships had provided. The energy signatures were clearly artificial and moving with purposeful intent toward the galactic rim. Because Counselor Dramor, we have independently verified their sensor data, Yeel explained patiently. Our most sensitive instruments are now detecting the same anomalies the humans warned us about. Something massive is indeed approaching from extragalactic space. The debate raged for hours, with delegates forming into increasingly polarized factions. The militarist alliance led by the hegemony species pushed for immediate integration with human forces and full-scale war preparations. The pacifist coalition argued for diplomatic contact with the approaching entities, refusing to believe that any intelligence could be entirely hostile. A third faction, the isolationists, demanded that the humans return to exile and leave the galaxy to handle its own problems. Meanwhile, in the space around Zaharia Prime, the human fleet had grown. What started as 12 vessels had expanded to over 300, as Admiral Chen called in reinforcements from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. The ships maintained respectful distances from Council installations, but their very presence served as a constant reminder that the balance of galactic power had shifted overnight. Captain Zaroff found himself at the center of the crisis. As the officer who had made first contact with the human fleet, he was summoned to provide testimony at every council session. His crew had been interviewed, examined, and questioned by intelligence officials from a dozen different species. Captain Admiral Chen's voice came through his personal communicator as he stood alone on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance. "Could I speak with you privately?" Zaroff activated the secure channel. "Of course, Admiral, though I should warn you that everything I say is likely being monitored by at least 6 different intelligence agencies." Admiral Chen's image appeared as a small hologram beside him. Even in miniature, her presence seemed to command attention. "I am not concerned about surveillance, Captain. I wanted to ask your opinion about something more important." "My opinion hardly matters in decisions of this magnitude," Zaroff replied. "On the contrary, Captain, you and your crew were the first to see us without the filter of political considerations or ancient prejudices. Your initial reaction to our arrival will help us understand how other species might respond when they encounter us in larger numbers." Zaroff considered his words carefully. "Admiral, my crew was shocked, but not terrified. We were curious rather than hostile. But we are also military personnel trained to handle unexpected situations. Civilian populations might react very differently. That is what concerns us," Admiral Chen admitted. "We have been watching your species develop for 3,000 years, but observation from a distance is very different from direct interaction. We have forgotten how to be diplomatic." It was a surprisingly vulnerable admission from someone who commanded such overwhelming firepower. Zaroff found himself reassessing his assumptions about human psychology. "If I may ask, Admiral, what happened to your people during the exile? 3,000 years is a long time for any civilization to remain united around a single purpose." Admiral Chen's expression grew distant. "We nearly did not survive it, Captain. The exile ships carried about 50 million humans when we left the galaxy. Within the first few centuries, we lost almost half our population to depression, suicide, and what we called the Gray Death, simply losing the will to live." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of historical tragedy. "Humans were not meant to live in empty space between galaxies, Captain. We need challenges, exploration, the possibility of growth and discovery. Take that away and we begin to die spiritually long before our bodies fail." "But you survived," Zaroff observed barely. The survivors became focused on 2 things: preparing for the Devourers' inevitable return and ensuring that no other species would ever have to face what we experienced. Those purposes kept us alive when nothing else would. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from the Eternal Vigilance's bridge. Lieutenant This's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Captain, we are receiving priority transmissions from the Outer Rim. The colony on Zarian 7 reports massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace. Configuration unknown, but the patterns match human projections for Devourer scout forces." Admiral Chen's holographic image flickered as she received similar reports through her own communication channel. When her image stabilized, her expression had hardened into the mask of a career military officer. Captain, the timeline has just accelerated. The Devourers are 18 months early. Across the galaxy, deep space monitoring stations began reporting similar contact. The artificial intelligences that had slept for 3 millennia in the void between galaxies were finally making their return to the galaxy they had once tried to harvest. The first encounters were brief but devastating. The Zarian 7 colony managed to transmit sensor data for exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds before their communications went silent. The energy readings showed ships unlike anything in Galactic database, vessels that seemed to absorb energy weapons fire and use it to power their own systems. Within hours, 6 more colonies reported contact with unknown entities. Within 12 hours, all 6 colonies had gone silent. The pattern was always the same: massive energy signatures, brief contact reports, then nothing but empty space where thriving settlements had existed. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as panic spread through civilized space. The abstract threat that Admiral Chen had warned about was now consuming actual worlds filled with real people. The Devourers are not following their historical patterns, Admiral Chen reported to the assembled delegate. Previously, they sent small scout forces to probe defenses before committing to major attacks. These initial strikes suggest they are far more confident than they were 3,000 years ago. Councillor Vrex's earlier concerns about human intentions seemed petty now that actual extinction was consuming the galaxy's outer systems. Admiral, what do your forces recommend? We need to coordinate a unified response immediately, Admiral Chen replied. My ships can engage the current Devourer forces, but we cannot protect every system simultaneously. We need every available vessel from every species working together under a unified command structure. The chamber erupted in arguments as species that had barely cooperated on trade agreements were asked to subordinate their military forces to a unified command. National pride, historical grievances, and technological differences all became obstacles to the cooperation that survival demanded. Ambassador Kesethera stood slowly, her voice cutting through the chaos. Fellow delegates, while we debate command structures and territorial concerns, entire worlds are dying. The humans are offering us their protection and expertise freely. What more do we need to make this decision? 6 months after first contact with the Devourers, the galaxy was losing the war. Despite the best efforts of the combined fleets, the machine intelligences adapted to every tactic, absorbed every new technology, and grew stronger with each engagement. 17 colonies had been completely harvested, their populations converted into raw materials for the ever-expanding Devourer fleet. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiance, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The humans had shared their most advanced technologies with the Galactic Alliance, but it was not enough. The enemy they faced now was far more sophisticated than the machines their ancestors had fought 3,000 years ago. Admiral reported Commander Torres, her tactical officer. We are receiving distress signals from the Centauri cluster. The Devourers have broken through the outer defensive line. At current speed, they will reach the populated worlds in less than 6 hours. The Centauri cluster contained 12 inhabited worlds with a combined population of over 8 billion beings. It was also strategically positioned as the gateway to the galaxy's core systems. If it fell, the path to major population centers like Zeria Prime would be wide open. Deploy the 3rd battle group to reinforce the cluster defenses. Admiral Chen ordered and signaled the Hegemony fleet to coordinate a flanking maneuver on the Devourer left wing. She knew it would not be enough. The human forces in the galaxy were formidable, but they numbered only in the thousands of ships. The Devourers had already demonstrated the ability to construct new vessels from harvested materials faster than the Alliance could destroy them. Ambassador Kesethera's voice came through the communication system from her position aboard the diplomatic vessel, Harmony. Admiral Chen, the Valkyrie Defense Fleet is requesting permission to attempt a suicide run on the primary Devourer construction facility. Our ships may not have your firepower, but we can overload our reactor cores. Permission denied, Ambassador Admiral Chen replied immediately. Suicide attacks only provide the Devourers with more raw materials. We need every ship for the coordinated withdrawal to the secondary defensive line. The conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms throughout the human fleet. Captain Zarost's voice came through the emergency channel from his position with the Allied forces. Admiral, our sensors are detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the outer system. Energy signatures are off the scale. Are those more Devourer reinforcements? Admiral Chen checked her own sensors and felt her breath catch. The energy readings were massive, but they were not coming from Devourer technology. The quantum signatures were unmistakably human, but the scale was beyond anything her forces had brought to the galaxy. All ships maintained defensive positions. She ordered, though her voice carried a note of wonder she could not quite suppress. I believe the cavalry has finally arrived. Space itself began to ripple and tear as massive objects forced their way through the barriers between dimensions. What emerged from the void made every previous display of human technology seem primitive by comparison. The first ship to fully manifest was larger than most space stations. Its hull stretching over 50 kilometers from bow to stern. Its surface was covered in weapon batteries that pulsed with barely contained energy, and its superstructure incorporated technologies that bent local spacetime into impossible geometries. But it was not alone. Ships continued to emerge from the dimensional tiers in numbers that boggled comprehension. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. Carriers the size of small moons launched fighter wings that numbered in the millions. Dreadnoughts that could have served as mobile planets took up formation positions that stretched across light years of space. Dr. Yeel, observing the spectacle from the scientific vessel Discovery, could barely process what his instruments were telling him. The energy output from that fleet could power our entire civilization for centuries. How did they build something like this without us detecting the construction? Admiral Chen smiled for the first time in months. Because they did not build it in this galaxy. Doctor, what you are seeing is the true human expeditionary force returning from the void between galaxies where we have been preparing for this moment for 3,000 years. The flagship of the massive fleet was a vessel that defied easy description. It appeared to be partially constructed from folded space itself, creating optical illusions that hurt to look at directly. When it opened communication channels, the voice that emerged was hauntingly familiar. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Void Fleet," the transmission announced. "Sarah, sorry we are late to the party. Traffic was terrible in interdimensional space." Admiral Chen's laugh was part relief and part hysteria. "Marcus, your timing is impeccable as always. The Devourers have grown significantly stronger since our last encounter. We have been watching your engagement reports from the dimensional barriers. Impressive work with the resources you had available. But now it is time to show these machines what 3,000 years of preparation looks like." The Void Fleet moved with a precision that made Admiral Chen's forces look clumsy by comparison. Ships that dwarfed entire cities coordinated their movements with the fluid grace of a single organism. More disturbing was the way space itself seemed to bend around them, suggesting technologies that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. The Devourers, who had been advancing steadily toward the Centauri cluster, suddenly found themselves facing opposition that outclassed them as thoroughly as they had outclassed the Galactic Alliance. Human weapons that fired contained singularities, tore through Devourer hulls like paper. Energy beams that existed partially outside normal spacetime bypassed enemy shielding entirely. But the most shocking aspect of the human assault was not their technology. It was their tactic. Instead of the methodical, logical approaches favored by most galactic species, the humans fought with a creative chaos that the machine intelligences could not predict or counter. "Sarah," Admiral Webb's voice carried across the communication channel, "we are going to try the Alamo Gambit on their primary command vessel. Think you can keep the smaller units busy while we execute?" Admiral Chen grinned fiercely. "Marcus, I have been waiting 3,000 years to see that maneuver used in actual combat. Light them up." What followed was less a battle than an art form. The Void Fleet movements told a story of loss, sacrifice, and determination that resonated across species barriers. Even the alien crew members, who had never seen human culture before, understood that they were witnessing something profound. The Alamo Gambit involved 17 massive human ships surrounding the largest Devourer vessel and creating a localized space-time distortion that trapped both attacker and target in a temporal loop. For outside observers, the engagement appeared to last only minutes. For the participants, the battle raged across subjective hours as they fought the same engagement repeatedly until the Devourers' adaptive programming broke down from processing too many paradoxical outcomes. While this epic engagement occupied the enemy's attention, smaller human vessels executed rescue operations that saved millions of beings from harvested worlds. Their technology allowed them to reverse the Devourer conversion process, restoring organic matter that the machines had processed into raw materials. Captain Zaroth watched in amazement as human ships no larger than his patrol vessel somehow managed to carry entire populations to safety. "Admiral Chen, how are your smaller ships holding so many refugees?" "Our sensors show impossible passenger loads. Dimensional folding technology," Admiral Chen explained. We learn to create pockets of stable spacetime that exist partially outside normal reality. It is the same principle we use to hide our construction facilities between galaxies. The tide of battle turned completely within hours. Devourer forces that had seemed unstoppable were systematically outfought by human tactics that combined impossible technology with strategies that bordered on insane. Where the machines relied on logic and adaptation, the humans employed creativity and intuition. Ambassador Kessathira, monitoring the battle from the diplomatic vessel, found herself weeping, an unusual emotional response for her species. Dr. Yale, are you recording this? Future generations need to understand what they are seeing. Every sensor, every instrument, every communication channel, Dr. Yale confirmed. This is the day mythology became reality and reality became legend. The final assault on the Devourer command nexus required the combined efforts of both human fleet. Admiral Chen's in-galaxy forces provided precise targeting data, while Admiral Webb's Void Fleet delivered weapons that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The massive enemy vessel, which had seemed invulnerable to conventional attack, simply ceased to exist when hit by weaponry that negated its molecular cohesion at the quantum level. With their command structure destroyed, the remaining Devourer forces began a coordinated withdrawal toward the galactic rim. But the humans were not content to simply drive them away. Ships that could traverse interdimensional space pursued the fleeing machines into the void between galaxies, ensuring that this particular threat would never return. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy forever changed. The peaceful civilization that had existed for 3 millennia was gone, replaced by something more complex and dangerous, but also more resilient. Species that had never imagined the need for military cooperation now found themselves integrated into defense networks that spanned thousands of star systems. Admiral Webb's flagship took up position near Zahiria Prime, its massive bulk serving as a permanent reminder that the age of galactic isolation was over. When he finally appeared in person before the Galactic Council, his presence was both reassuring and unsettling. Members of the Galactic Council, Admiral Webb addressed the assembled delegate. We have eliminated the immediate Devourer threat, but our sensor networks indicate other hostile intelligences in the deep void. This galaxy is no longer safe simply by virtue of being isolated. He gestured to holographic displays showing the new human installations throughout galactic space. We are prepared to establish permanent defensive positions and share our advanced technologies freely. In return, we ask only for the chance to be part of the civilization we spent so long protecting from a distance. The vote to formally integrate humanity into galactic civilization was unanimous, though some delegates still struggled to accept the magnitude of what had changed. Species that had considered themselves the galaxy's dominant powers now understood that they were junior partners in a larger cosmic community. Ambassador Kessathira found herself appointed as the primary liaison between humanity and the other galactic species. Her years of research into human mythology had made her uniquely qualified to understand their psychology and motivation. Admiral Webb, she asked during their first formal meeting, will your people be content with peace now that the immediate threat has passed? Everything in our historical records suggests that humans require challenge and expansion to remain psychologically healthy. Admiral Webb smiled, and for the first time since the Void Fleet's arrival, the expression seemed entirely human rather than intimidatingly alien. Ambassador, we have spent 3,000 years preparing to protect a galaxy full of species we barely remember. Now we have the chance to actually get to know our neighbors. Trust me, that will provide all the challenge and wonder we could ever want. The integration was not without problems. Human technology was so advanced that it threatened to make entire galactic industries obsolete overnight. Human military doctrine required levels of coordination and sacrifice that some species found philosophically troubling. Most challenging of all, human psychology brought a sense of urgency and competitive drive to a galaxy that had grown comfortable with stability. But there were benefits as well. Diseases that had plagued various species for millennia were cured within months of human medical intervention. Technologies that had seemed theoretically impossible became everyday reality. Most importantly, the galaxy no longer lived in ignorance of the threats that lurked in the cosmic dark. Yale published the definitive historical account of humanity's return, titling it The Day the Myths Came Home. His work became required reading in schools throughout civilized space, ensuring that future generations would understand the price of peace and the value of those willing to pay it. Captain Zarath found his patrol duties expanded to include coordination with human deep space monitoring networks. The empty sectors he had once found boring were now revealed to be part of a vast early warning system that protected billions of lives. Admiral Chen, he asked during one of their regular coordination meetings, do you ever regret the sacrifices your species made? 3,000 years of exile, generations who never saw their ancestral home. All for the sake of species that had forgotten you ever existed. Admiral Chen looked out at the stars through the observation port of her ship. Captain, our ancestors left Earth because they believed the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. We spent 3 millennia learning that the greatest wonder of all is having someone to share the discoveries with. The galaxy would never be the same. The myths had returned, bringing with them technologies and perspectives that challenged every assumption about what was possible. But more than that, they had brought hope. Hope that no species would ever again face extinction alone. That the darkness between the stars would always have guardians watching from the void. In the years that followed, new legends began to form. Stories of human ships appearing in the nick of time to save endangered colonies. Tales of impossible rescues and miraculous technologies. Myths of warriors who fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple belief that every thinking being deserved a chance to see tomorrow. The humans had returned from legend to become legend once again, but this time they would not be facing the darkness alone.